This conference will now be recorded.
Yeah, do you guys know like what is Splunk? Do you have any basics of Splunk?
Yes, I mean, we are using that as a monitoring tool.
Yeah,
Where I need my expertise is to run the query and create a dashboard. So for the logs, run the different queries that I need to build up my skill there and develop in dashboard.
correct. So basically, right, it is also one of the log monitoring. What Splunk basically is, it is basically a log monitoring tool. Let me do a screen share. So we have multiple monitoring tools, right? We have APM tools, okay, and Splunk is also a log monitoring tool basically. So in what is the specialty of the Splunk, right? Whatever the transactions you perform, okay, all the transactions will be recorded in the logs. So in logs you will be having some information like what is the status code, okay, what is the response time, and what is the action you are performing, whether it is a get, post, or it may have other information like if it is, let's take one example of a retail application. You will get the logs of like something like when you are doing a purchase, or when you are doing a like add to cart operation, okay, when you are changing address. So you will be having more sort of detailed information, okay. And when you compare uh, uh, when you have these APM tools, right, what these APM tools like AppDynamics and Dynatrace does, right, they won't get all the snippets, right? They will take samples. Like when you are running some performance test, what actually happens, right? Randomly it picks some data, and that one you will be taking the choreographs, or you will be monitoring that. But Splunk, what happens, right? It will take every transaction because everything is recorded in the log. Okay, that is the specialty of the Splunk. Like let's assume you found like some of the session ID is having some issue. Okay, so you can troubleshoot that particular session ID end-to-end flow. Basically, Splunk is a log monitoring tool. It will monitor the logs. Okay, just to recap, what is Splunk means? What it basically does is it will collect the logs, okay, and using the SPL, okay, you can search and analyze, and you can prepare the dashboards. Let's assume there are one use case, okay, like now you are running some performance test, and in your performance test, right, you have you have done some purchases, okay, and you have placed some orders, and you have like searched some orders. So in that particular 1 hour, okay, it actually wants how many orders has been placed, okay, how many has been searched, and how many has been like something like deleted or something. So there is some, you know, right, there is some catch concept. Let's assume like in some of the cases what happens, right, when you are searching some product, okay, it will be present in catch, okay. So let's assume there is one scenario where if the data is stored in memory, right, it won't get recorded, it will just display. For such things, okay, whether it is fetched from class, if it is fetched from logs, we can fetch it from logs. Whether it is if you have some snippet like fetched from cache or fetched from DB, right, if you have some criteria like that, right, you can filter out that. That is just one example, okay. So basically Splunk will collect the logs like irrespective of whether it is an application server or it is a uh, it is a active directory, Windows, radio frequency devices, okay, sensors, virtual machines. Basically Splunk monitors everything, okay, from any small radio frequency device to an application server, mainframe servers, okay. Splunk can monitor anything, okay. Okay, why we use Splunk? Basically, Splunk, why use Splunk is like, if you are a developer or a tester, right, you will use the Splunk for investigation or troubleshooting the application environment or development environment or testing environment. If you are having some any issue, right, you can troubleshoot. Okay, let's assume like your development environment or testing environment is having some 50 nodes or 50 servers. Okay, so it is something like a horizontally scaled environment wherein you have to log into every server and check for your logs. Okay, it is a tiresome job and it will take a lot of time. So let's assume like out of 10,000 transactions, 20 transaction failed, and you have to do some analysis. You have to understand, you want to know like where the transaction failed. Then you have to log into each and every server and you have to check the logs, right? It will take a lot of time. But when Splunk is there, what actually happens, right? It will pull all the data, it will collect all the data from the source machines, and it will keep something like this. I will just use. Okay, let's assume you are having some servers. Okay, you are having some 50 application servers. Okay, like that you are having some 50 application servers and you have Splunk over here. Okay, okay, so basically what you do, right, you will install something like a universal forwarder to ship the logs from your application servers to the Splunk. So it is a basically an agent. So in any APM tools also you will be having agents, right? So if it is a Dynatrace or if it is an AppDynamics, basically you will install an agent, okay, in your server, and that server will be able to send the data from your application servers. Okay, it will be able to send the data from your application, required data from your application servers to the corresponding application. In the same way, in Splunk, you will be having something like app servers, right? I mentioned, like, let's assume like it is a Tomcat server. Okay. Now, whenever we have to install the universal forwarder in this application servers, and we have to do some configurations. Once we have done, right, this universal forwarder will take care of shipping the logs into the Splunk, and this Splunk, right, the data is stored in something like an index. So index is nothing but a directory basically. So whenever you create an index, basically like in DB you will create a database, right? In database you will be having something like tables and rows. In the similar fashion, here the logs pertaining to some project or application, right? They can be create underscore Tomcat logs. Okay, I will create one index called as Tomcat logs. Okay, under this Tomcat logs, I can ship all the application server logs over to here. Okay, I can ship under one index, I can store multiple servers logs. Okay, let's assume you want to categorize between the operating system logs. In your company, you are having multiple infrastructures, okay, wherein which you have something like Linux logs, you have Windows logs, and you have AD logs, and you have WAS server logs, or you have this Tomcat logs. So let's assume there are some WAS specialists who require only the Splunk logs of, sorry, we require the logs of only the WAS server. So we can put all your WAS and servers under one index. Or if you are working under one, like it is something like a category basically. Okay, if you search with something like index is equal to Tomcat logs, then you will be presented with the all the logs from here. Okay, but you have to install one software in your client machine. This is a lightweight software. Okay, so if you go to the Splunk site, okay, whenever you click Splunk download or something, right, you will be presented with two things. Okay, one is the Splunk cloud platform. So Splunk is having some like here the Splunk will be hosted in the cloud and you will be provided the credentials of an instance. Okay, you no need to maintain the infrastructure. You can get it for free also, 14 days free. You have to register with your email ID and they will be sending you the URL. Okay, you can use it for 14 days. After that it will expire. And there is something like a Splunk Enterprise. Splunk Enterprise means like they will give you the software, okay, and that software you have to install it in your laptops, okay, and it is valid for 60 days. The trial will be valid for 60 days. Let's assume after 60 days you want to still use it, right? Just delete the directory, okay, uninstall and reinstall. It will work. Okay, so if you want to, the current version of the Splunk is like 8.2.6. Okay, so in prior versions of before 8, right, there are not much enhancements. Like in 8 version, right, they had made a remarkable changes in the dashboards. Previously, we are using the uh, like classic dashboards. Okay, now what they have done, right, they have changed everything in the version 8.0. From 8.0, there is a change. I'm not registering, it is just pretty straightforward. Okay, if you want to register, right, you have to provide the business email ID, password, first name, last name, phone number, and just you can create your account by providing the details. If you just click on create your account, right, the account will be created. Okay, so I'm already having these credentials. Basically, as I mentioned, if you want to set up Splunk Enterprise, and why you will go with Splunk Enterprise means, let's assume you want to put your data in your on-premises or in your infrastructure, you want to store the logs. So not all companies will prefer cloud, right? The log may contain some sensitive information and they don't want to put the logs in the cloud, okay, because the cloud is maintained by a third party, either it can be AWS, Azure, or whatever. Okay, so what they will do, right, they will set up a cloud, they will set up the Splunk infrastructure in their on premises, in their data center. Okay, then you will go with the cloud. Let's assume like if you are working in a financial projects, okay, though there, right, you will be having the customer specific information. Okay, so that is a sensitive data. For such, right, they won't prefer the Splunk cloud. They will set up their environment in the on premises only by installing the Splunk Enterprise. Okay, so basically, right, Splunk supports three things. One is like you can perform the Splunk Enterprise Edition. Okay, you can install the Splunk in Windows, Linux, and Mac. Okay, in Windows, right, it supports like Windows 8.1 and Windows 10, and server editions, that is for 32-bit. For server editions, right, like Windows 2012, okay, 2012 or to 2016, 2019. So these are the compatible infrastructure for installing the Splunk. Okay, so 99%, okay, the Splunk will be installed only on the Linux. So I haven't seen Splunk on Windows in the company. Like mostly like 99% you will have the Splunk infrastructure only in the Linux. Okay, so here If you see here, no, like it supports like these kernels, and in Mac also it supports like Mac OS 10.9 and 10. Sorry, 10.9 and 10.10. Okay, so basically, if you see, right, Splunk supports two things I already mentioned here. Okay, Splunk will have two types of softwares. One is like universal forwarder, one is the actual Splunk. So actual Splunk is the enterprise edition. Okay, here you will be having the enterprise edition. Okay, so basically Splunk supports two softwares. One is like Splunk Enterprise Edition as well as the Universal Forwarder. Enterprise Edition will be something like 300 plus MB. Okay, whereas Universal Forwarder is a lightweight program. Okay, which will be something like 50 to less than 50 MB or less than 60 MB. So in the initial days, when the Splunk started, right, they used to use the same Splunk, okay, Enterprise Edition in the as a universal forwarder. Okay, they used to install this 300 MB software in the application server. So what they have observed, right, they had the application servers are or the application servers are experiencing lot of overhead. Okay, it is causing the performance degrade when they install or when they run this universal forwarder in the application server. So they have come up with some universal forwarder Jmeter, which is a lightweight program. Okay, till now, right, we have seen this is the server edition. It supports only minimal things, right? Here in Windows it is supporting 32 and 64. In Linux it is supporting like Debian. Okay, means it is Debian package is for Ubuntu, and RPM is for Red Hat, and TARZZ we can install in the any Linux distribution. Okay, but if I go to Splunk, if I install Splunk Universal Forwarder. Okay, now you see. So the compatible, this is the client side software. So the Splunk Universal Forwarder is a client side software. And if you see here, right, same like in Windows, it supports like 32-bit and 64-bit, whereas from Windows 8.1 and 8.10 as well as the server editions. Okay, but if I go to Linux, right, you are seeing so many. And if you see the size also, it is like less than 50. It is like all 30 MB or 20 MB. So this is the lightweight program or the agent that needs to be installed in the your source software. Okay, and it supports previously, right, server editions was supporting Windows, Linux, and Mac, right? Now, if you go to the agents, right, it can be installed on FreeBSD, Solaris, as well as the AX machines. Till now, any doubts? Are you clear?
Yes.
If I want to explain the users also, like the Splunk is being used by many people across the organization. If I want to say, right, it's like an Excel in an IT industry. Like it will be used by the developers, okay, for and testers for troubleshooting the issue, okay, and support or operations teams will be there. They want to monitor the production systems. So in production systems, right, Splunk has capability to create alerts, okay, and they can check the logs also. So support teams also use the Splunk, and security teams will be there. Okay, let's assume, okay, in your organization you are having like 1 lakh servers. Okay, and in 1 lakh servers, right, the hacker will try to penetrate into the network using one system. Okay, so in your some 10 days, sorry, 10 years back, let's assume like if a hacker attacks a company, right, you will know after 2 or 3 days because they don't know instantly. But when you have Splunk and when you have all the servers being monitored and you have alerts mechanism in place, let's assume like there is one scenario normally in every server, right? You will see the passwords, right? Field passwords. In 1 hour, you will be having like in 1 minute, you will be having some 10 in your like 50K servers. The trend is something like in 1 minute, you will be having some 10 failed logins. Suddenly, if you are seeing some spike in 1 minute, you are seeing some 50 failed logins. Got it? Then you can configure some alert and automatically instant it will be sending a mail to the corresponding team. They will isolate the system from the network. Okay, the Splunk is also used by the business analyst. Let's assume you're working on a retail company. Okay, let's assume like a Amazon.com. Okay, so now as a performance guy, you asked the projections of the you asked them NFR. Okay, the NFR will be provided by BA. Okay, by looking into the production logs, production data. Yes, sir. So let's assume there are different actions like orders placed will be in 1 hour some 50K. Purchases will be something like 2K in an hour. So these metrics can be derived by the BA from Splunk. So he will see the peak trend and he will add some buffer and he will give you. Got it? So the Splunk will be used across all the teams, irrespective of he's a manager or a tester or a network guy or a developer. Okay, like is the tool, it's a universal tool, like mostly it will be used by everyone. Okay, so there will be some audit requirements, okay, like PCI, SOX and HIPAA. Okay, so Splunk supports that one. Okay, there are some competitors for Splunk like LogDN, Elasticsearch, Sumo Logic, and SolarWinds Logging. But out Fortune 500 companies, 450 or 480 will use Splunk. In Fortune 500 companies, okay, so 470 will use Splunk. So that's why you are seeing the Splunk in every organization. They may or may not use same APM tool, but most of the people will prefer Splunk. Okay, because it will compress the data. Why the people will prefer Splunk? No, why? Because let's assume okay, from each machine, okay, it is generating some 10 GB data. Okay, 10 GB data. Why people will prefer? Why organization prefer Splunk? No, here from each server per day you are getting some 10 GB. Okay, like that you are having some 10K servers. Okay, you are having some 10K servers. So automatically you will be shipping something like 100K GB, right? Here totally as a whole you will be shipping something like 100K GB to the Splunk. As Splunk is a proprietary software and it has some compression mechanisms. So ultimately what will happen, right? Whenever all the data gets stored, right, it will consume only approximately 50K GB. Okay, from 100K, okay, it will compress to 50K GB. Means 50% to 60% it will compress the data, due to which the infrastructure cost will be reduced, as well as the maintainability also will be easy. That's why the people will prefer Splunk over the other tools. Why? Because it has some algorithms or the compression mechanisms such that it will compress the 50%, it will reduce the data. Means if I'm pumping some around, like if I'm sending some 100k GB data per day, ultimately when it comes to Splunk, right, it will be 50% only. So maintaining a infrastructure with 100k GB data, okay, is bit difficult than maintaining a infrastructure with 50k GB per day, right? The complexity will be reduced to know. That's why people will prefer Splunk over other tools. Okay, like actually, if you see the in your organization, if you see the Splunk deployment, right? Splunk is not a single software basically. So just now I have told you there is something like a universal forwarder. If you see universal forwarder, it will ship the logs from your application servers. Okay, it will ship the logs to the application servers to your indexer. So basically Splunk has multiple components. Okay, so and each is having one server. Okay, one purpose. One is like universal forwarder. So the job of the universal forwarder, I will put it in a diagram and I will tell you so that you'll understand better. This is the server one. This is the let's assume like these are the application servers. Why I'm telling this one, right? Basically, let's assume like if you want to switch your career, okay? If you want to switch your career, okay? Splunk provide that opportunity also. Let's assume like you are into performance testing for some time, and if you are good at writing the dashboards, right, you can switch your career to Splunk developer. Okay, basically Splunk has three roles. Okay, one is like Splunk developer. They will be specialists in creating the dashboards based on the customer need. Okay, so they will, like Java developer, right, there will be some Splunk developers who will be working explicitly only for creating the dashboards. Okay, and in some organization, sorry, and there is one more role called as Splunk Admin. Okay, Splunk infrastructure is very big. Okay, just now I mentioned, no, there will be some multiple components like universal forwarder, indexer. Okay, I will tell the components, but Splunk admin is a guy who will maintain the Splunk infrastructure. Let's assume like I'm having 50k servers, okay, application servers, and I want to ship the logs from your clients to the Splunk. I want to onboard the data to the Splunk. Then Splunk admin will take care of like installing this universal forwarder and configuring the universal forwarder. Okay, so if you are good at, if you know bit of Linux and if you know how to install Splunk and how to install the Splunk infrastructure, right, then you can apply for these jobs. And in normal organizations, right, in the startups or something, right, Splunk admin and developer job will be done by only one person. They will recruit one person who is like explicitly works on Splunk. He will take care of the installations as well as preparing the dashboards. Okay, in another or some organizations, right, like irrespective whether you are a BA developer or a tester, right, you will be using the Splunk and you have to create the dashboards based on your project needs. So as I mentioned, right, the role like Splunk admin, okay, he takes care of like installing, configuring, and data source ingestion and apps management and cluster management, right? So in order to achieve that, right, okay, here this is infrastructure. Okay, this is basically the infrastructure of the Splunk. I will show when I tell like you have to work on as a Splunk admin, no, so he has to take care of configuring this setup. Okay, here to give a glimpse, right, just remember like universal forwarder is an agent, okay, which will ship the logs from your application servers to your indexer. Okay, and there is something like a heavy forwarder. I will tell you like heavy forward what is its purpose. Basically it will try to parse the data received from the universal forwarder. Okay, here now this is my application server. Okay, okay, this is my indexer. Okay, indexer is a component. Basically it will store the data. So from universal forwarder or from your application server, whenever the data comes, right, this will be received in your indexer. Okay, in indexer you will be having something like a bucket. Splunk basically stores the data in bucket, but a bucket is nothing but a directory. Okay, here you will call it as bucket. Okay, so let's assume, okay, you are sending the data to Splunk from various systems, various Linux or Windows or like routers, switches. If you are sending the data, right, it will be sent via, it will be sent to the indexer, and every indexer, in every indexer you will be having something like bucket where the logs will get stored. Okay, now we talked about the heavy forwarder. No, let's assume basically by default, right, Splunk will send all the logs whatever you configure. Let's assume like in my application server, okay, it will send all the logs. Okay, you know something like this. No, I will ask one question. Okay, do you know what is log level?
Yes, it's a different level of setting, like
Yes.
debug, warning.
Yeah, so you have different types of logs. Let's assume you are having something like error. Okay, you will be having error, you will be having something like warning. Okay, you will be having something like info, and you will be having something like debug. Correct? So in this case, debug will have error, means you will have only errors, right? This is one thing. When you have warning, when you enable warning, what will be sent? You logs related to warning and error will be sent, right? When you enable info, what will be sent? You will be having error related information, warning related information, as well as the information that is tagged under the info tab. Correct? When you put debug, what will happen? You will be having all sorts of information, whether it is an error or it is a detailed information. Correct? Yes or no? When you
Yes,
put
yes, correct.
when you put the log level as debug, you will be having the information of error, warning, info, and debug. Now I have kept my logs in info mode. Okay, in production, I have kept my logs in info mode. Okay, but my customer is there. Okay, let's assume like it is a MasterCard. For MasterCard, okay, you have so many vendors, no? So many banks who will be sending the data, like ICICI, HDFC, okay, or American Express, whatever. For MasterCard, right, they deal with so many people. So they don't want any errors and warnings. They want to see only the success messages. But the funny part is like if I enabled info, automatically I will have warnings and errors. Yes or no? My client requirement is
Yes.
you want to see how many transactions processed from various banks. Okay, for he want to give that stats. He wants that number and how much amount is being transferred through that MasterCard for that particular bank vendor. Like credit card means ICICI, ICICI is there. From ICICI credit cards or debit cards, how many transactions happened, what is the total value of that amount. Only these two information is needed. So you don't want to get confused with these two sorts of data, like error and warning. You want only the success cases. But ultimately, when I enable info, I will be having the data of error and warning. I can't avoid it, right? In such cases, we will be going with the heavy forwarder. So here I need parsing, right? I want to exclude this error and warning. In such cases, what will happen, right? You will introduce one component called as heavy forwarder. So basically what will happen now is your application, let's assume like this is your application server. Okay, this is your application server. Your application server will, sorry, this is universal forward. I have to put US. Two cases. If you want to directly use the data, whatever is that is present in whatever is generated in the application server, you will go with the universal forwarder. Whereas if you want to parse the data, okay, now I will send the logs to heavy forwarder. Heavy forwarder will send the data to the indexer. Here I will be applying the parsing. Or there are some use cases. Okay, in logs, let's assume like you're printing the username and customer IDs. Okay, in logs you will be printing the username, customer IDs and address, right? Whenever I'm storing, right, I want to just mask that. Means I want to replace it with XXXXXS or like a something like that. I want to mask it. Then I can use the heavy forwarder. So when the logs get stored in the Splunk, right, the data will be something like or like some value. The actual data will be masked. Got it? Like first name is, so let's assume like first name is ABC. Then it will be masked to something like in log, like okay, or something like that. Like that you can mask the data. Got it? If you have something like first name colon ABC is the name, means that will be masked to FN colon XXX, such that no one can identify when they visit the log, right? No one can steal the information out of it. So this job will be done by the Splunk admin. So he will be configuring the universal forwarder, and he will be configuring, like as I mentioned, if you want to parse the data, right, he will be doing that configuration in the universal forwarder. Okay, there is one case here. Here I'm having some 50,000 servers. Okay, and here I'm having one indexer. Will that be sufficient? Or if I'm having 1 lakh servers, will one instance of indexer is capable of like getting the data from all these sources, 1,000? No, right? Yes, sir. If
So
I'm
we
sending the data
might
from
need
1 lakh,
to, yeah, we might need to put it in a cluster
yeah.
with multiple, yeah.
So here, right, we have to put our indexers in a cluster. Whenever in your performance testing itself, whenever you enable your debug mode, okay, your performance will degrade because of the heavy IO. So normally you will run the performance testing in the info mode or error mode based on your requirement. You won't run the performance test in the debug mode. Why? Because there is a high IO happening in your disk, which will degrade the performance. In the same way, okay, here what I am doing is I am ingesting so much data. Like if I'm ingesting 5 GB per machine per day, ultimately when it comes to here now, it will be like, if I'm having like 1 lakh machines in that infrastructure, ultimately like it is loading like 5 lakh GB per day. There will be heavy IO. So in this component, what I will do, right? I will put, I have two solutions. One is like you put that in a cluster mode. So you will be having multiple indexers, indexer 1, indexer 2, indexer 3, and indexer 4. Okay. And if I want to read the data, right, from the Splunk, I want to use, in spite it is having a GUI to access the data, I want to use this one. I will be installing one more component as a search head. In Office, right, you will be given the search head URLs. Got it. So what, whenever you send a request, you know, you will be given the search head URL. You will log in into the Splunk. Whenever you give, like, whenever you select the date, okay, the search head will call the indexer and it will get the data from it and it will present to the user. Got it? Basically, from search head, you will request the data from the indexer by specifying like what is the index, what is the time duration you want. Based on that, the Splunk will get the data from your indexer and it will be present in the server. Because as there are like so many people who will be using, if as we are having some 1 lakh servers, okay, from where the logs are being spent, there will be like multiple teams. So here also they will form the cluster. Search heads also will have some cluster. Okay, so here you will be having some load balancer. Basically here you will be having the user will hit the load balancer URL, and from load balancer URL the request will go to any one of the search head. Got it? From this search head you will be calling the indexer. Okay, the indexer will have the data which is pulled from the your Splunk, or universal forward will send the data to the indexer. No, it will have the data and it will present it. So like that you will be having big infrastructure. Let's assume like here I'm having some multiple indexers. Here there will be something like cluster master. This is like too technical. There will be something like CM, cluster master. Okay, he will take care of managing the cluster. Like if I'm having some 20 nodes of indexer, this cluster master will tell in that 1 lakh servers which data should go to where, which server. That will be managed by the cluster master. It is basically a big concept. Okay, just I'm explaining. Okay, no need to bother, just I'm telling, like, now you know what is universal forwarder. Heavy forward also you know, right? It is just to parse. Indexer is used for storing the data. Cluster master, if you are having a cluster of multiple indexers, right, there will be one fellow called as, one component called as cluster master, who will be managing the cluster. Okay, just now I told like search head is just fetching the data from the indexer and present to the user. Here it has capability of like creating the dashboards and all those. Okay, and there will be something like deployment master and license master. So deployment master is like, if you want to, like, if you want, let's assume like your application server is having some 50 servers. Okay, in your environment, performance testing environment, there are around like 50 servers. Now you have to configure your Splunk forwarder. We have configured the Splunk forwarder already, but you have introduced a new microservice and or a new log. So you have to, in every universal forwarder, you have to do the configuration in one shot. If you want to do all the configuration in one shot, no, you will be having the deployment server. Okay, yeah, it will help you to do the configuration in all the universal forwarders. Okay, there is one thing like license master. What this guy will do, right? This license master will, as you are sending the data, right, Splunk will get money based on the storage. Like if you store 1 GB, you have to pay for 1 GB, or if you are using some 10 GB, if you are storing some 10 GB data, you have to pay for 10 GB. It is not something like based on the number of universal forwarders, or number of the heavy forwarders, or number of the indexers. It is not based on the infrastructure. It is based on how much data you use. If you purchase the license for 1 GB, okay, 1 GB means you can configure you can configure 50 or 60 universal forwarders also. There is no restriction. Got it? So as the logs get pumping now, this component will keep a tab on the number of how much data that is being pumped to the Splunk. So all together, right, whenever you see the Splunk, right, this would be the infrastructure. So there will be like multiple ports and all those. I will explain like with the port numbers and all those. So you will be having something like 9997, 8089, okay, 8080, so many things. For now, today you have might have understood like what is Splunk, what and its infrastructure. Till now, any doubts? Apart from this one, now you have seen one thing, right? You have seen universal forwarder, which will get the data from Linux or Windows machines. Okay, you might have got, I told in one slide, right? Splunk monitors everything. So there is something like Splunk base. Okay, here, right? If you see, there are different categories. So let's assume like if you want to onboard the data from router, Cisco router or Juniper router, okay, or you want to monitor the VMware logs, or you want to monitor some other network devices logs, or if you want to monitor the infrastructure of the IoT devices. Okay, so basically what happens, right? There is something like a Splunk base where the companies or the Splunk or other companies, right? They will provide some apps to integrate to onboard the data. Okay, let's assume like I'm going to something like DevOps. Okay, so in DevOps, right, you are having some apps like Jenkins. Okay, and you are having something like a JFrog. You are having a New Relic. Okay, so basically what happens, right? In Jenkins, you will get some sort of information like how many passed builds, how many failed builds, okay, how how many runs that has been completed, right? So Splunk will get all this information from the Jenkins, means how many runs you have made on a particular day. Okay, let's assume like after 1 month your manager asked how many builds are successful in that particular month, how many builds are failed. Got it? Then if I have Splunk in place now, from right, whenever you run a job in Jenkins, you will be having last 50 or 60 jobs only. After that, right, it will expire. You won't be able to see the logs, so you won't be able to see the the jobs in Jenkins. But if I store everything in if I integrate the Splunk to Jenkins, right, then what will happen, right? You will be able to see that information. Okay, how many agents are there? I will show one diagram. Yeah, okay, one second. So here I am having some 140 executor nodes. Okay, what is the queue size? Okay, and here This is what I was talking about. Like how many slaves are there? Okay, how many builds are passed on a particular day? Okay, how many are failed? Okay, how many are stable? How many are in like failure, aborted? Okay, or how many are in progress? So these sorts of information can be retrieved by the from the Jenkins if we integrate it to the Splunk. So here I will be having like how many are total results in terms of like failing builds, and here I can have the connection. Let's assume like in my my setup I'm having some 50 Jenkins or some 10 Jenkins, so I can able to see the status whether it is disconnected or connected from this dashboard itself on a like day wise. So like that you can store the store this type of data in the Splunk. Okay, like that, right? Splunk is having so many apps. Okay, so if you take ITI operations, right? Here you will be having something like Linux app. From Linux you can get the data like CPU, memory. Okay, using this app. Okay, so like these are the multiple applications. So there is something like Uber agent. Okay, so there is one component of application or something which is Uber agent, which will have its own stuff. So they want to send that data to the Splunk. So what they will do, right? They will use these app to integrate to the Splunk. Like that, you will be having so many apps. There are around like 2000. I'll put it as popular. So if it is an antivirus, okay, you can get that data into the Splunk. Okay, if you are having something like uh, Dynatrace. So if you want to integrate the Dynatrace to Splunk, that is possible using this app. Okay, so I don't know many of the company names. Okay, but like if you are integrate with the your GitHub with the Splunk, then you will come to like how many code commits has happened on a particular day. So those sorts of information can be retrieved in the Splunk with some dashboard. Okay, now if you have these dashboards, right? See, so if there are any alerts or something also it will show. So here also it is showing the like which team or something who is using user changes, how many repositories and total how many events. Okay, and if there is a code commit also from which country, the number of code commits happened, right? That also it will show like if you are working, your organization is present in multiple locations, it will give a stats like from which country how many commits happened or something like that. It will put into the visualization. So if you want to integrate any third party application or software into Splunk, right, you have this is something like Splunk user base. When I log into the Splunk now, here I can see, so these are the apps basically. So if I want to add any app, then I can click on manage app, and here I will be presented with these apps. Okay, whatever I shown right in Splunk base, that will be listed. Have to install and do some configuration to populate the data into the Splunk. So, and it is used by so many. If you see the category, right, it is being used by like IT operations, business analytics will have some type of that apps. So for email stuff, you will be having network security, network device. Okay, because this is being used by security team also, right? So you will be having so many apps, thousands of apps. Any doubts? So normally, like tomorrow, I will be explaining that like Splunk UI, okay, each and every component. So how to write queries, we'll see. Okay, just now I told you, no, you'll store the data something like index, right? Here I have created with the index is equal to app, okay, and it will store, it will show me the logs. In my diagram, I told you, no, in indexer, you will be having something like index. In my first diagram, I have mentioned like index is equal to some tomcat or something you will have, right? In my case, I'm having something like app. In that, I will be able to retrieve the, if I give something like tomcat, if I ship all my tomcat logs to this particular index, right, then I will be able to see all the logs pertaining to that tomcat server. If it is Linux, then Linux. Let's assume like if I want, no one will put for project, okay. Let's assume like there is something like project, okay, project A. So if it has multiple infrastructures, right, like Linux servers, Windows servers, microservices, and all those, right, they won't put everything in one tag. So for microservices, you will be having separated data, separate index. For application servers, you will be having Tomcat. You will be having different index like that. You will put it. Okay, that's how you'll organize it. I'm done. So tomorrow I will explain like what is index and all those. If you have any questions, I'll answer.
Yeah, so here, is there any way I can find out how many indexes are there by looking into in this
So there
screen?
is some, like, yeah, like if you give something like index is equal to star, okay,
Hmm.
and make sure like you are having last 15 minutes data or something, or
Right.
better to have some in real time or relative, right? Okay, just put 1 minute. Okay,
Hmm.
1 minute ago, apply and give star, or sorry, here it is not populating directly, okay, in your office, right? Here it is in your office, right? If you give something like star with 1 minute, no, the
Right.
last one, how much data you are getting, you will be able to see. But for now, right, it is not a real time, right? So I have loaded the data manually.
Yeah. No,
So
no, not data. I'm looking for, let's see,
that's what, that's what,
someone
that's what,
has created,
that's what.
like
Let me
10.
complete.
Okay, okay.
So it is something related to time. Means what I have done, that I have loaded the data into one particular index.
Mhm.
Okay. So if I give star and if I give like last all time, right, I will be presented with some data, okay, with the index name. So here I will be able to see the
I
index,
see. Okay, okay. Got it.
okay. But
Hmm.
in your office, right, you should not use last 24 hours or something. There will be overhead on your Splunk. Just to put
Right.
one, just the earliest is just 1 minute
Okay.
or 60 seconds and click on apply. Then you will be presented as it is a real-time data, right? Every time the logs will be coming out. If you put a star, right, you will be
Right.
presented with all the answers.
So I have a couple of more questions. So we'll be doing all the practice with the query syntax and all this thing, how to build the query, run the query, all this thing, right? Yeah, and yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, yeah, you will be having, I will be giving a walkthrough of like multiple queries, like, so preparing the dashboards, right? You did
Right.
some queries, like
Hmm.
if you want to see top three errors,
Right. And
okay, and if you want to see something like top three transactions, okay, in your suite you may have so many, okay, and like in status code you will be having some success codes, right, like 302, 200 or whatever. Now you want to see only success codes, how to filter that, okay. and like let's assume, yeah, you will be knowing, like you will be covering everything. Just give me a
Okay.
second.
Okay. Basically, I want to know how do we fine tune the search and build the query, right? So
Yeah, yeah. You will be covering like what is field table and how to sort, rename,
right.
search, okay? And you will be like you will learn like how to like top rare command, stats command. So stats command is like, let's assume you want to know the count of only the purchases that happened
Right.
on that particular day or
Mm,
hour. You can get the count. So basically, if you run some performance suit, no, like client side, you will be sending some, you'll be doing some from tool, you'll be doing some transactions. Let's assume you want to match that count with this count in the server.
mhm.
So you will use stats. Chart also is for the same, and time chart. Let's assume like you want to see some data on hourly basis or per minute basis.
Mm,
Stats will give count, okay, only count the number, but you want to see the trend, means per minute how many are happening, per hour how many are happening. Okay, so you will be seeing, you will use the time chart, and dedup is for like removing the duplicates. So
right.
if I show something like here, so this is what I have. Okay, if I use action, no,
Mhm.
so I will be presented with all the data. I will be presented with so much duplicate data, so I can't use this one. So like that I'm having.
Many. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so I add to cart. Now my customer asked like, what are the operations you performed as part of the suit? So like I want to make them unique, right? So I will run something like this. Okay,
Okay.
these
Hmm.
are only the actions.
Okay.
So like that, if you want like this purchase, how many? What is the count? Okay, now you got the count and you want to submit everything. Okay,
Mm,
let's assume like this purchase is one order, add to cart is operation, and remove is one operation, and view is operation, change is one operation. Basically, right, you want to come like get the count of all the operations that happened in that particular hour, so I can
mm.
add that. Okay, we'll go through the queries.
Okay.
No. Uh,
And so this training session will be for how many days? Sorry, I missed your demo
yeah,
yesterday, so I don't have much detail, right? That's why I'm asking some question here. So the training session will be for how many days, and
that's
are
two
these on a
weekend,
weekdays, also including weekend, or in how many hours per session?
15 hours. It will
I'm sorry,
15 hours.
15 hours. So it's kind of 1 hour a day, kind of, right?
Yes, it's like mostly 1 hour a day. Like if I skip any day, right, I will take next day 1.5.
And will be done in 15 days then, correct?
15 hours. Yes.
Yeah, yeah. And one more question, like next week I'll be going out of town. Is there any way we can pause this training session until
Yeah,
I'm back?
I will speak with Anita.
Right, right. Because then I won't be able to attend the session as I will be traveling through. So
No problem.
that's one more thing. And one more question. Sorry.